Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to
Opinion. America has a free speech problem too. So who's first? I don't know. Let's see.
Of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
This is the First Amendment that protects your right to stand here.
Do you think we have a problem with free speech?
we have a problem for the consequences of free speech. We don't have a problem with free speech. You have free speech, you just have a problem with the consequences.
Right, but shouldn't free speech be consequence-less?
No,
No?
because you live in the government. You live in laws. So if you're not about that life, then you're not about that life.
But
So there's a philosopher for civil disobedience, Thoreau. If you truly believe what you're protesting, then you are okay with those consequences that you receive for that protest. You cannot pick and choose the beauty of your liberties.
but by that logic, every country has free speech then, because it's like in Russia too.
They do. It's just what's the cost of it?
So you're saying North Korea has free speech? That's what you're saying, by
Well, I'm saying, you see, you want to pick extreme cases. But what I'm saying, even if you want to say North Korea, in North Korea, you can, but the consequences of it is
death.
not ideal as death. The question is, do you accept death? Also, don't do things foolishly, because will the death there be seen for others to be shocked? It would be kind of pointless. So it's not ideal. You have to think things more thoughtfully to know that if you protest in the States, you're able to have views, all eyes on you, where you can get your message across. You probably will have to spend time in a jail. You probably will get rocks thrown at you, but that's all the part of free speech. There's a beauty and there's the ugly side to it. You have to accept all those things and think logically, what is the best way to bring change. Next.
Protects mine.
The freedom of speech, widely considered the cornerstone of modern democracy, has also become increasingly weaponized,
But opinions shouldn't be illegal.
not just in its use,
Bring back free speech to America.
but also how we personally define it,
We don't ban offensive speech.
how we perceive others' definition of it,
And across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
and how we police it when it goes too far.
But we also know that
I guess that's what caused this video, because he claimed that Europe doesn't have free speech, I'm assuming. Because that two part, I wonder, because for it to be two, there has to be someone first.
Yeah.
there have
Well,
been
this man, even, or people who think like him, they only think like through their eyes and their eyes alone, and they see better than other people can see. So I wouldn't take what he say like with much weight.
But he's in a position of power, so by
Yeah.
being in that position, his words carry weight.
Yeah, and that's the issue.
infringements on free speech
I did
that
my
actually
part,
affect not
others?
just the British.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time.
Yeah,
The First
speak
Amendment
up.
to the
Let
U.S.
'em
Constitution
know.
protects the freedom
How
of
do you
speech.
come all the way to another country and say you guys don't have the excuse me? Someone got to speak up. I'm glad he did.
But that protection is not absolute.
But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with.
And despite recent condemnation from American
I mean, that kind of describes America, though.
What do you mean?
If your democracy can be destroyed by a few $100,000 from another country, it doesn't. What did he say? Hold on.
But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with.
Yeah, because wasn't the whole case in 2016 election that Russian
Yeah.
interference, and basically that's why
It's from him. From his
that's why
side,
that's
from
why
his
Trump
party.
got elected.
Yeah.
Despite recent condemnation from American leadership on how other countries choose to limit it, the United States also struggles within itself to find consensus on when the freedom of expression goes too far. Should the freedom of speech be absolute? or strategically censored? And what kind of problems does this ambiguity create for yourself?
So the TikTok, I mean, TikTok is a private platform. I do believe private platforms should have the right to regulate whatever content they want on there. It is like if you enter to someone's building, you have to follow certain rules, like take the shoes off, wear a shirt, don't work barefooted, stuff like that. So if I enter TikTok platform, it's kind of like their building. If they say I cannot say word sex, then I cannot say word sex because that's their rules.
The issue, I think, is where you see that when TikTok went dark in the States and it was brought back to light, there was a message stating that this was the Trump administration that brought it back, which makes it very weird.
It was very, very politically charged.
Yeah. And it kind of like show that TikTok is like impossible works in collaboration with U.S. government.
That message really made it that they in the Trump
TikTok looked different when I came back.
That TikToks is in Trump's pockets. It really made it clear with that message. Yeah.
And for your country, American or not. Well, let's take a look.
Her first name is Type.
That's
it? Such an interesting name. I think so. Type Ashton, no?
No.
What's the channel name? Type Ashton. Name Type.
Or maybe it's Tipe.
Tipe?
In general, the freedom of speech.
Type sounds like a name, like Type. It's just like there's a noun type.
I'll call her Ty. Hey, Ty.
I don't know. Interesting.
Speech is the right to articulate opinions and ideas without interference, retaliation, or punishment from the government. In most Western...
So that kind of goes that your opinions shouldn't get you punished. That kind of how in an intro we talked about it, that there's consequences. So what she's saying, there shouldn't be consequences for free speech, basically.
Democracies, the term speech is interpreted broadly and includes spoken and written words as well as symbolic speech. So, for example, what a person wears, reads, performs, and protests. Freedom of speech is a right preserved in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights and is formally granted by the laws of most nations. But in the United States, the freedom of speech is a bit unique in that it also protects speech whose ideas put forth are illogical, offensive, immoral, or hateful. From a global perspective, this places the United States at the far end of the freedom of speech spectrum, with the other end occupied by authoritarian nations such as China, North Korea, Myanmar, and Russia, where speaking out against the government can land you with jail time. But what happens here in the middle? This is quite a complicated assessment, but the Global Expression Report, published annually by Article 19, does provide a good data-driven analysis on the freedom of expression globally. As you can see from this graphic,
this is a very interesting publication because we have seen crime rate or something we did in this. I remember this publication. It's a very cool publication.
Majority of European countries are quite close to the United States in providing broad protection of general freedom of expression. In fact, many surpass it by their measurement, including Germany, which I imagine would come at a surprise.
Hold on. Let me try to zoom in to see what we're looking at there.
One moment, please.
Because I wish she did it for us, but...
Oh, no, you can't see anything still.
Oh, I know, I can see it. Okay, so number 5, Estonia. Number 6, Norway. Number 7, Finland. Number 8, Ireland. Number 9, Germany.
As you go down is less?
Yeah, Iceland, Portugal, Austria, New Zealand, Canada, Argentina. Argentina, wow, Latin America. Spain, Czechia, Italy, Latvia, Costa Rica, Uruguay, France, Dominican, Netherlands, Vanuatu, and United States.
This is a list indicating what exactly?
Which countries basically have the most open speech.
So top has most?
Yeah, top. So basically, United States is 26th in the world based on the freedom of speech. I didn't see Lithuania. So either Lithuania is number 1 or they're not there.
What do you think?
Germany, which I imagine would come at a surprise to Mr. Musk and Mr. Vance. But it is worth noting that this particular metric, which, by the way, assesses
that's how ironic is that?
countries.
What, that Germany's higher than... Yeah.
giving them a score between 0 and 100 based off of 25 indicators, is not solely a measurement of what I can or cannot say. Rather, it builds a quantifiable perspective on expression, from posting online to protesting, investigating, and accessing the information needed to keep leaders accountable. The latter likely hindering the US assessment. That being said, leaning more towards the restrictive end of the spectrum would be countries like Thailand. For example, in April 2021, a Thai man from the Chiang Rai province in Thailand was arrested and received a 28-year sentence for violating a law which prohibited criticizing the country's monarchy. The truth of the matter is, the freedom of expression is broad, and the tools that you have to exercise it vary widely from one country to the next. But it's also important to emphasize that the freedom of expression is a multifaceted human right, and there isn't concrete consensus on it. For example, purists who vigorously defend the First Amendment and advocate for the unlimited exercise of free speech.
Catch me in the new season of The White Lotus. Watch it now
caught
on
you.
Max.
Yeah.
Believe that
Back
speech,
to seriously.
unlike physical conduct or force, should be countered with other speech. The general idea is that speech in and of itself is not violent, and challenging ideas promotes critical thinking and growth.
I don't know. I disagree. I feel certain speech can incite violence.
Listen, you have to be okay with being challenged. If your point is a good point, it can stand being challenged.
No, okay.
And it should be exercised and not just accepted because this is the person of authority who said that
I'm not saying like about a debate scenario where two people debating. You're right in that case. I'm just saying like certain speech can incite violence.
Oh, definitely.
Like if somebody says, "Let's go do this," and everybody, "Let's go," they take their pitchforks and go do it. Well, that's inciting violence. That's, I mean.
But I don't know if this example is the best example.
Okay, January 6th. Somebody said, "Let's go storm whatever they stormed, the Capitol Hill." So the person, he had free speech. He said, "Let's go," and then the person, I don't know if the person actually went, the person who, but everybody else went. The person didn't. Should that person be liable for saying, "Let's go"?
I think everyone is responsible for their own actions. I think it depends what's the intent to let's go, because they can protest and follow the guidelines and stand where they're supposed to stand to protest. But what they did, which is different, is they breached the Capitol.
Right. So if he said, "Let's go breach the Capitol,"
let's go breach.
Let's go breach, but the person never breaches. He just says, "Let's go."
Oh yeah, because he coordinated. He has some
but
responsibility of coordinating.
So that's what I'm saying. That speech incites violence. So not all speech is just speech.
Yeah.
Like certain speeches have to be held accountable by law at certain point. So this point that saying any type of speech should just be countered by the other speech is not valid to me.
That's why we have limits.
Right. So that's what. Right. You're right. That's what I'm saying. Because she's saying that side they're saying there should be no limits. But I'm countering that there should be limits.
It's just when you hear that argument, oh, we don't have absolute free speech, they're not being specific in what speech they want to uplift.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to be specific on on speech because it's not something you can like really quantify.
In theory, but in practice, things become much more sticky. And prominent leaders on both the right and the left engage in censorship in the United States. Instead of using speech or protest to counter the speech or expression that they criticize or dislike, people on both sides of the aisle appear to want to prevent ideas they don't like from entering the conversation. Take what happened recently at Stanford University as a prime example. When a Trump-appointed federal judge, U.S. Circuit Court Judge Stuart Kyle Duncan, gave a speech at the university, student protesters interrupted him and disrupted the speech he had been invited by other students to give. But things escalated from there. Instead of telling the students that they were in violation of Stanford's speech policy, the Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, who attended the event, appeared to sympathize with the students. Then, Stanford's law school's dean, Jenny Martinez, issued an apology to the judge and explained to the public that Stanford's speech policies do not permit coordinated efforts to shut down invited speakers. And then things escalated again. Students then protested the dean's apology, claiming that counter speech is free speech. But coordinated efforts to shut down someone's speech through disruption or threat of violence, sometimes called the heckler's veto, is actually not protected free speech.
I
is
hate
one
a
of those
heckler.
situations
Because
where
the
the
heckler, let
students
me tell
want
you
to
something about a heckler. The heckler only care about themselves to get elevated, to be seen by people. They don't care about the cause. They care about their own elevation.
Most of the time, yeah. Most of the time, they'll lead
Goodbye.
hecklers, yeah.
Do not feed the troll.
The followers behind the heckler, yeah, they might care about the
They might
cause,
care.
but the person in front, they're cloud chasing.
to counter speech with speech, but ended up violating free speech. But before my viewers on the right decry this as an example of the woke mob,
I would and when you go to college and the and professor invites someone to give kind of like a lecture, they have authority to speak. I think it's ideal to at least offer the counter position, because you do make people feel like this is a superior position, because this is someone that the professor who has some sort of prestige to come to be invited to talk and lecture, and then it becomes the point where there's other side of the discussion that should be invited to as well. Like we see with radio, when they bring in one side, they have to bring in the other side, so you have a full picture. And I think that's important in spaces of education, that you hear at least the whole picture and not just one perspective, where you hear everything that's positive.
we need to balance this criticism a little bit. Historically, it is the left, on principle, who has been a major champion of protecting free speech, including offensive and hateful speech. This most famously includes the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, who in 1977 defended the right of these guys to march in a town whose residents included many Holocaust survivors, and their defense was led by a Jewish American lawyer. Furthermore, the infringement of free speech is something that the right regularly engages with as well.
Free speech.
Maybe we should boycott Starbucks. I don't know.
Free speech. You're gonna boycott Geico. Free speech.
Get that son of off the field. Freedom of speech.
For all of the upheaval and anger about cancel culture, conservatives too have embraced an extreme version of censorship in order to resist a rapidly changing society, with laws that would ban books, stifle teachers, and discourage open discussions in classrooms. And even just last week, the Trump administration banned the Associated Press from covering White House events. The AP is the United States' most omnipresent media source. They span out across the country, and their pieces fill your local newspapers and major news media outlets.
I didn't know that AP got banned from White House access. That's
Yes, they're saying that traditional media no longer have like priority to have access to go to these press events, and instead they're inviting like people with platforms, like someone could be from like YouTube or podcasts or bloggers, non-traditional media people, to have access to get to question the president, which is problematic because he's kind of picking and choosing who has access to the information he's saying and who challenges him on this information.
By law, when the government makes a decision, it can't be arbitrary. They must have a compelling reason to restrict the First Amendment on the rights of free speech and the freedom of the press. And a squabble over how the AP labels the Gulf of America / Gulf of Mexico, which precipitated all of this, according to the Trump-appointed judge who's overseeing the court case on this move, is pretty clearly viewpoint discrimination and a violation of free speech by the White House. Today's video is made possible by my supporters on Patreon. If you would like to gain early access, please consider subscribing. A big problem with the freedom of speech in the United States is that it is widely misinterpreted and often weaponized as a way of virtue signaling. And I see this all the time in the comment section of my videos. Not all, but quite a few many of my American viewers are convinced that they and they alone have the righteous interpretation on the freedom of speech, and that those living in Europe specifically are being silenced. However, in the
You wanted me to go back?
Yeah, I wanted to see what the thoughts were. At least I can say what I want in the USA. Europeans live in fear of the government. We have freedom of speech. Of course, American news has more opinions about the news. You can't be jailed for having opinions here.
Wow, very ignorant opinions. I've never heard such nonsense in my life.
United States, the freedom of speech does not mean that you can say whatever you want when you want. Both public and private institutions have the legal right to restrict your speech, both in person and online. Take public universities as a prime example. Despite being public and receiving funding from the federal government, they still may legally restrict speech that falsely defames a specific individual, constitutes a genuine threat or harassment, is intended and likely to provoke imminent unlawful action, or otherwise violates the law. In addition, universities may reasonably regulate the time, place, and manner of speech in order to ensure that it does not disrupt the ordinary activities of the university. In short, universities are not censoring you by expecting the bare minimum of civility. Hate speech, harassment, and insults are not the same thing as criticism and do not contribute to critical discourse. And that is the exact same distinction that countries like Germany enshrine in their laws. It's a central pillar of their society, and therefore it applies.
We have seen in our German reactions that insulting someone is illegal. Remember that you can't just like go and say insult someone.
Everyone in society. You gotta be civil with one another. Your voice matters. You have the right.
I don't know how it is here about insulting someone. I think it's legal, but if someone like acts upon you an insult, I think it could be argued in court that that was the first hypothetical punch thrown. I think that could be a defense. I'm not sure though.
I think it depends on context.
Yeah, it definitely does. But I think saying just insulting someone in words, I don't think that's illegal per se. But I do think if
like
it
if
escalates,
you insult your boss and your boss fires
oh no,
you,
no, that just cause for termination for sure. But on the street, you insult somebody.
I don't know if it's cause for termination. I don't know.
Well, Florida, you don't need
Yeah,
cause.
it really depends.
So it depends on the state. Florida, you can get fired for existing. So, for breathing. But
like for example, it can insult like your boss says something that is along the lines of like sexual harassment. Like you can't say, there's things that I don't think you can say as an insult and think it's
true. That's
permissible.
Yeah, like if you say, oh
man, she's hot.
or like, oh, you have small tits, something like that.
Yeah, I think it can touch on the lines of like these rules that we protect and limits in speech in. So I don't know, maybe if let's say you call the boss fat, it can be awkward. I don't think you could be punished for this.
That's a light insult though.
That's a
light insult.
Like, I don't know what you want from an insult, because I'm thinking you could really hurt his feelings. And now let's say he puts more of a workload on you, he kind of punish you in a way.
That's just live.
I think what you can counter is that if you feel that you're being treated differently than your
mistreatment, workplace mistreatment,
your other your colleagues, then you can argue and say, well, he's picking on me because of this and this. Then you can advocate. So I think with even insults, like it really depends on the context of what was said.
To say what you think, share information, and demand a better world. You also have the right to agree or disagree with those in power and to express these opinions in peaceful protests. What you don't have the right to do is to be about it. But you see, that might actually get me in trouble. I'm only kind of joking here. Back in
the thing is, you
2021,
see,
a German
I don't know what she said. That can be blank about it.
Be a dick about it.
User was
even that, because there's this case. It's like, what is obscene? And one of the writings from the judge is that you know it when you see it. Like you know, like you like, come on.
That's a horrible definition.
Like, but the thing is kind of, that's why everything is like case by case. Like you have to like really review and understand to see if it passed or not.
By 6 police officers at 6 a.m. demanding access to his home.
I think it's the Miller's
They were there to
test,
gather
I'm not too
evidence
sure.
for a criminal investigation. What potential crime prompted this? Well, he called the Interior and Sports Minister for the city of Hamburg a male genitalia part. But this is hardly the first time that Germany's strict laws against speech crimes, including crimes based on incitement and defamation and hatred, have hit the headlines. In June 2020, the German police union filed a criminal complaint against the newspaper Tageszeitung, claiming that it had incited hatred by publishing a column comparing the police to, quote, trash, end quote, that should be thrown in the landfill, end quote. And somewhat similar laws limiting speech with similar salacious headlines can be found in other European countries as well. In 2021, for example, a French court fined an activist 10,000 euros for depicting President Emmanuel Macron as a certain Austrian art school reject on billboards protesting the country's pandemic policies.
Interesting. I wonder. I don't know if that will get you consequences here.
Have you seen Trump look like
But
this.
we have though. We and SNL do it.
Mm-hmm.
We have seen that.
So it's okay.
I
here.
think it's okay here. Yeah.
And in 2020, Europol,
It
the
may
European Union's
cause
law enforcement
uproar, but
Yeah, uproar. But in terms of legally, I think
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody would do anything.
agency had a coordinated clampdown on online hate speech in Germany, Italy, France, Greece, Norway, Britain, and the Czech Republic.
now I always
I really
think
do think
of
you could probably make
Kathy Griffin with the chop head.
Even that, it crossed the line, but legally she didn't face consequences. It was more so like morally.
She lost.
She
job.
lost a lot of stuff, like
Yeah.
personally wise, just a bad publicity.
People stop associating.
Yeah.
Like she was punished in other ways.
Yeah, but legally,
not legally.
she
I
wasn't.
don't know if
She
she
wasn't
faced
held
anything.
liable. Yeah, she didn't face any consequences.
make the argument
But
that
it did seem like they were looking to sue because it traumatized her Melania's son, because she thought
They were looking for it, but I think it didn't go anywhere. Yeah.
in the United States,
Which I
the
can
freedom of speech is
understand.
one of the few truly libertarian impulses that we have in the US Constitution. And so many Americans view European laws on restricting speech as a form of state-sponsored censorship. There are numerous examples of speech, body language, or imagery that would violate the laws that many European countries uphold. But at the same time, in my opinion, prohibiting wrongful conduct is perfectly consistent with a right to liberty. And by wrongful, I mean conduct that violates the rights of others. Some people will interpret this as your freedom ends where mine begins, but I think at a much simpler level, it is that no one has the right to do wrong to another person. And again, disclaimer, this is my personal opinion on this. But I find that a huge missing piece of this discussion on the freedom of speech, especially when we're talking about it from a European versus American perspective, is that we spend the majority of the time talking about the limitations and the rights of the people who are exercising free speech, and not nearly enough on the rights of the people who are affected by it. The sad reality is that we live in a different
Good
world
point.
now from when the First Amendment was
on
drafted.
her necklace, what shape is that? Is
I
that a
don't know.
country?
I was looking at it as well. I'm not sure.
The tyranny, harassment, and oppression of today does not necessarily come from a king, but from the unfettered speech and misinformation propagated amongst the masses. Americans especially are at a real civil reckoning with what to do when you live in a largely unregulated digital society that also has a propensity for violence. Online hate can sometimes find a way to come into real life and hurt people. And we see this most dramatically and tragically with the most vulnerable, minorities, and young people in our society, who equally deserve our protection. So while I think it is entirely honorable and desirable to try to protect the rights of all citizens without trampling on the rights that we see as the foundation for our democracy, it is also difficult, if not impossible, to achieve entirely in practice. And believe me, I agree wholeheartedly that this is an incredibly difficult thing to manage and legislate. Where exactly that line lies between expressing an opinion.
Yeah, because even explaining to Congress people how social media works, how is it monitored, and the parties involved, it's just a task on its own.
Yeah, it's a bunch of old fucks who don't understand how technology works.
Or a critique versus a violation of hate speech is not clear. And it is important that we constantly evaluate it. And I also think that it is equally as important that we spend just as much time teaching people how to engage in civil critical discourse. Speaking as somebody who grew up in the United States, I never received any formal education on how to have a critical civil debate on touchy subjects like religion or politics or ethics. It was just simply not part of my K-12 education because probably the school system didn't want to be sued. And debate club as an extracurricular activity was not something that I had access to. That was usually something that was only reserved for the wealthy school districts. And you can read into that what you will. But I think the lack of training and tools on how to be critical without insulting someone.
But I think all of that, that comes in college levels of education, though.
But you have to get to college.
Which is problematic because not everybody goes there. But as she just said, so what, you want to change the curriculum to include the debate? Not necessarily a bad idea, but what are you going to take out?
I don't think you need to be in debate in order to have a discussion about anything. I think what is annoying is, like, for example, in your English class, your professor can ask a specific question about what did the author think. Instead of accepting answers of different sorts, they already have in mind what the answer should be. So how does that work? That teaches students that there's only one
One way.
answer and that's it. No, there's no possibility to have a discussion to kind of think out another perspective or
Right.
introduce another
Yeah.
perspective. They have to go by the answer and that's it.
Yeah, something like that. What the author had in mind should definitely be up for interpretation. Yeah, there's not like a right answer to that. Anybody could have their own answer and should be okay. It's not like math. 1+1 = 2. Fact. Oh, like opinions.
And given that everyone has to take English class, that's the class.
Yeah,
to
actually,
do so.
yeah, it should be one of the Englishes debate. Yeah.
Because you do like English, you do like the writing, even you do writings, prompts in your English class. This should
Absolutely,
take
yeah.
place.
Is evident in the carte blanche that we give freedom of speech in the United States. Many will say it is too difficult, too complex, and rather than debate and mediate in order to find a common ground that does the most good with the least amount of harm, we simply say all or nothing. But I personally disagree. It is precisely that those things which are important and good are difficult. I don't think Europeans always get it right, but I also don't think Americans do either. The freedom of expression and the problems which surround it is something that we both share, and one of the most pressing issues of modern society.
You have to be polite and civil when people are talking, then other people are talking, and then you get a chance to talk. Set up your own rally. A lot of people worked hard for this. Come on, man.
But I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section of this video. I am certain that this specific topic is going to bring out some
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, she does a very well done video.
Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord. And as always, share as much kindness as possible.